Welcome back. I'm Rebecca Hull. I'm Managing Director at Manifesto, and welcome to another episode of our podcast, Leaders with Purpose.
And I'm Lou Lai, Chief Client and Transformation Officer at Manifesto. And in this episode, we talk about vulnerability and self-doubt and how you manage that in your own leadership journey. We spend a huge amount of time unpacking AI, from what it means to be a leader and what you need to be doing, but also the use cases and even applying things like service design. So it's an incredible episode.
So welcome back everyone to another episode of Leaders with Purpose podcast. Really excited to be joined today by Zoe Amar, digital and AI expert consultant in the not-for-profit sector, and also so much more. Welcome, Zoe.
Thank you. It's so lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. And I've just asked you for how would you like to be introduced? And you've given me a very modest title, I think, for all that you do. So to help our listeners understand a little bit about what you do right now, could you just give us a little snapshot into the world of Zoe?
Of course. So I do wear a lot of different hats, which is why it's confusing. So I run a digital and AI consultancy for charities called Zoe Amar Digital. So we've been going since 2013. I'm also co-chair of the Charity AI Task Force, the co-author of the Charity Digital Skills Report, and chair of the Charity Digital Code of Practice. So a lot of digital things going on in the sector.
Yeah, many, many hats.
Absolutely.
I was fascinated in our sort of briefing call, though, to hear about your career up to now. And you very much didn't start out in this space. So could you just sort of tell us about your journey to that moment where you were like, aha, the charity sector is where I belong?
Yeah, absolutely. And it has absolutely very much been a journey in many ways. So I studied English literature. I've got 2 degrees in English literature, and I was really passionate about the subject. So I ended up being a teacher. That's what I trained to do after I left university. Really enjoyed it. It was quite challenging in many ways to make ends meet, especially with debt from university and that sort of thing. So I did a weird career handbrake turn. I actually went off to law school at that point. I think I'd watched a bit too much This Life. Certainly that was one of the things that inspired me. So I went off to study law. I really wanted to be a solicitor. My sister's a lawyer, and I think that also inspired me as well. And then ended up working in the city for a few years, doing lots of real estate work, as it's known, and also some property work, also working with some charities as well, which was really interesting. But in the background, and in fact, this is all down to my wonderful sister who really encouraged me to do it. She said, you should be doing some volunteering as well. So she encouraged me to get in touch with Toynbee Hall Legal Advice Centre. And that was the very first volunteering I did. And it became the weekly highlight in a very busy calendar where I was working with a lot of people who perhaps were slightly different to the people I'd work in the charity sector in many ways in terms of values and that sort of thing. And it was an absolute oasis in my work diary where I was increasingly starting to feel perhaps this isn't what I want to do for the long term, even though I enjoyed some aspects of it and was good at it. So I just got to a point where I thought I have to really scratch this itch, which is exploring the charity sector. And so I did something which was either mad or foolish in retrospect, perhaps both. I quit my job. I put myself through some career coaching. And then I was really lucky because I stumbled across Reach volunteering, and massive shout out to Janet Thorne, the CEO, who I didn't know at the time, but as I've said to her since, absolutely changed my life and my career. I was then paired through Reach, who do professional volunteering placements for skilled volunteers, with a charity that was then advising other charities and government bodies about technology. And after I'd done some volunteering for them for a couple of weeks, they said, well, would you like to come in as a senior marketing person. And then I got a different role as head of marketing a few years after that. So I was there for 5 years. This is a very long career. I feel like this is a long story. Anyway, after my daughter, I was just about to go off on maternity leave, and unfortunately the charity had gone through a massive funding crisis. And so I was made redundant when I was pregnant. And I thought, I'm just going to do some freelancing for a bit in digital, do some digital marketing, digital fundraising, some digital strategy whilst I look for a permanent role. But gradually, and in fact, actually quite rapidly, more so than I thought, we suddenly started getting loads of work. I started bringing people onto the team because we were so busy. And I thought, I'm really enjoying this. And I seem to be quite good at it because our clients keep coming back, and I really love the variety of what we're doing. I mean, you must both have this in your jobs every day, and it's such a privilege, isn't it, be able to work with such a range of organisations. And so it just all grew from there. And over the last few years, we've moved into doing a lot more work around AI, and that's very much our practice within our wider practice of digital transformation and strategy. And I'm so lucky to be able to do something I like so much and which hopefully makes a difference across the sector.
What a story. It sort of feels like that, your career started in a very sort of a very strong purpose lens of teaching, and then went to sort of almost the other end of that extreme, and then sort of back to this point in the middle where it's you using all these kind of skills and knowledge and networks that you've built up along the way to deliver amazing work in this space. Is there anything that you feel that you picked up early in your career, or at any of those points that you feel is particularly helpful or grounding for you today?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question because I was reflecting on this when we had our chat the other
Yeah.
week. And it's funny, isn't it, that transferable skills, I think in many ways they're the most valuable skills you get in any career. So certainly from teaching, you really learn how to facilitate, to run sessions, to kind of read a room. It's a really underrated part of a teacher's skill set. And I was just using that skill set yesterday when I was working with an NGO, helping them get to grips with AI and thinking about their strategy and what they're going to do about their data. And exactly the same skills. It's just you're working with a different subject and different people and different material. And then from law, I think it's really all about learning to look after clients really well, to get to know organisations as you both do in your jobs, to understand what makes them tick, to hold their hands really through some really difficult change, really difficult situations, and also to make sure that you're showing that empathy and really caring for them at really challenging moments, as much as celebrating the wins with them as well. So I think those are the key things that I learned along the way, and they've proved to be super useful.
Brilliant. I mean, I think it's really helpful. Like, I have had a lot of sort of coaching, one-to-one sort of mentoring conversations in the past and currently with people who perhaps feel a bit stuck in their career or feel like I couldn't possibly transfer from this to that. And I look back at my own career, and I was cabin crew at the very beginning of my career. And I think
Wow.
that was actually one of the greatest lessons for my job now, managing a mission with limited constraints, time, all sorts of different variables. But I'm interested to understand your perspective on kind of a career change, because I think a lot of people do often feel stuck. And what was it that's helped you kind of make that sort of evolution each time?
Yeah, I think there's almost a skill in making the pivot, isn't there?
Yeah,
As much as actually getting the new job and hopefully being good at that. Honestly, I think it's all about focus, having a really clear focus for what you want to do, what you want to achieve in
yeah,
the new role, being really humble, because you often are starting at the beginning. Certainly, it was like that for me when I was transferring from law into working in marketing for a charity, as that was my focus then. And also, I think you've got to be really willing to learn, really willing to learn
yeah,
and learn the ropes and get to grips with things. So I think as long as you do those things,
yeah.
you can absolutely achieve it.
And the career sort of counselling that you talked about,
Mhm.
what kind of role did that play in your sort of in the pivot?
Mm. Well, just really helpful, isn't it, to talk to someone who's outside of the
Yeah.
situation. So I did have some coaching, but I also had a lot of advice from friends and family. The advice from my mum was useful to some extent. Some of it wasn't so useful. But it's good to hear all those different perspectives,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
And really important, because it's about challenging yourself. And actually, the big thing that I learned from that process of reflecting, thinking about what to do, was that you really have to trust your instincts.
Yeah.
That is absolutely fundamental. And it was really interesting what you described about how I had started my career in a really purpose-led place, and then had perhaps moved away from that when I was working in the city, and then moved back to it. And it's almost like a spirit level, isn't
Yeah.
it, with your values at the centre of
Mm.
it. And you really can't go through your
Mm.
life ignoring that, or certainly I couldn't. And that was the thing that brought me to the
Yeah.
sector.
Yeah. And I think for me, I certainly sort of reflect on what I see. And I think, without sort of wishing to put a gender perspective on it, but it is also true that women in so many roles just don't feel enough, and so your point about focus and perhaps really thinking about the things that you are good at, like, don't worry about the stuff that you're not. If you're never going to be an extrovert, or if you're never going to be good with numbers, that's fine, because there'll be an amazing pot of resources over here that you can really tap into and hone in on that. And a lot of the conversations that I have are people feeling like, oh, I couldn't possibly, because I don't tick all of these boxes, I don't have these experience, I haven't got the masters, I haven't got this. But I think it's just having to sort of reframe. We've got so many rich internal resources and experiences that we can draw from that we're not even aware of a lot of the time.
I think that's a really beautiful, really compassionate way to look at it.
Mm.
I really love how you frame that. And I'll be very honest and say that despite all the things that I've managed to achieve, I'm absolutely someone who sits with
Mm.
self-doubt fairly
Mm. Mm.
regularly. And it might not look like that from the outside, but that's absolutely who I am. And I've learned just do it
Yeah.
anyway. If it feels right, even if you're thinking, should I be in this room? Am I any good at this? Just to look at what I've done before and say, I'm going to give this a go.
Yeah.
I'm going to give this a go.
Yeah.
Because I guess one thing we were talking about is like, do I fit in this room?
Mm.
Is the room built for me? And this is, I guess, coming back to your point around sort of self-doubt. And one of the things that we've spoken about is representation in the sector, and like seeing people like you and feeling like you belong to be there. And then there's a sort of dual track, which Rebecca, we talk about, is like having people who have your back and are cheering you along and helping you see the things you can't see. And so I wondered what your experience was of kind of representation within the sector, and what kind of community or mentor kind of have you found in the sector that's helped you hopefully feel kind of confident and tackling that self-doubt.
Yeah, there's such an important issue. So thank you for raising that. And I know it's something that we've talked about a lot, haven't we? Because we've got quite similar
Yeah.
heritage, having Chinese and English heritage. And I think when you have that dual perspective on it, where not only are you a person of colour, but you're also a person of mixed heritage as well, it's an additional layer of complexity, isn't it? And the sector, as we know, isn't very
Mm.
diverse. I've had some lovely experiences of feeling very welcome and included. We all know that representation needs to be better. And there have absolutely been situations where I have very occasionally not felt included, and I have definitely experienced some discrimination, racism, sexual harassment, and yeah, it has been really challenging. And that's why I've talked about it. I've written about it, obviously without naming any names, because I want other people who have experienced that to know, firstly, they're not alone, and secondly, it's not acceptable, and it needs to be called out. So in terms of what we can do about
Yeah.
this, number one, I feel that as someone who does have this heritage, and has a bit of a platform, I try and talk about that, and hopefully create a bit of a path for people who are coming up through the sector, to offer to support them, and to know that it is possible, to progress and to do the things that you need to do with support from others. And I also think it's really important to have that community that
Yeah.
are going to support you as well. So there's some amazing people out there, like for example, Dalton Lung, who is Chair of Board Racial Diversity, Sarah Hughes from Mind, fantastic people who also have heritage as people of colour and who are willing to share their stories and are really supportive to others across the sector. So I think the sector is changing. It's probably going to go at a slower pace than we all would like. But I think it's about celebrating those moments when things are shifting and making sure that we're supporting people as they rise through the ranks and give them every opportunity and tell their stories.
And if we think about the different intersections of representation, and again, me and Rebecca sit here as leaders of a digital technology agency that isn't the normal makeup of kind of agency leadership. And so a big thing that we're talking about, which I guess what you've just referenced, is around the sort of platform. So sending the elevator back down for those who, who maybe don't think that they even have a chance to kind of get to where they need to go. And so if we think about, I guess, trustees, so huge workforce that are giving their time and energy for free as a sort of volunteer trustee, which, to be honest, I was thinking about my journey today and I could never have imagined 20 years ago, why would anyone want me as a trustee? And then you sort of have to fight that critic and go, no, I think I've got something to add, but
You're so talented,
it's
Lou. You're the kind of person who should be on
it's
every
really
charity board.
challenging. Yeah. And I wondered what your thoughts were on like the future of like volunteer trustees, the workforce, like the skills that, the sector should be thinking about beyond the fact that, you have time to do it. You might sort of have retired or have that capacity.
So I do wonder, and this is probably a little bit controversial, but I do wonder if the current model of trusteeship and the amount of time it takes to do it well, because it really does need time and attention. And I don't think you're doing it properly if you don't give it that time and attention. I do wonder if that model is actually sustainable in the modern working world. So if we think about the average trustee, I think they're supposed to be 57, and on average, a guy called John.
John or David.
John or
Yeah.
David. That's what I've heard.
Yeah.
A very specific demographic. John's and David's of a certain age. But it's means that firstly, it's not seeing the change, as you were saying earlier. It's not, you're not seeing the change in terms of the diversity of people who could be on trustee boards. And secondly, we're very dependent on John and David having all of that extra time, right? That they're at a certain point in their career where they can give lots of time to come to meetings and support the executive and provide that guidance and support and strategy to really guide the staff team and to work with them and learn together with them. But in the modern working world, I'm just not sure if that's possible. So someone in my family who is actually in their mid-50s now, really talented, leader in the corporate world, I keep saying to them, you would be fantastic on a charity board. They just do not have time to do it because they've had their kids a little bit later in life, as a lot of people do now. Their career is going absolutely great guns. They're really senior in a corporate. They don't have the capacity, as much as they'd like to really make the commitment as a charity trustee. So I wonder whether we'll need to look at slightly different models of trusteeship. I don't know whether it's a case of bigger boards, different types of role, using technology more as trustees to make things more efficient. But the current model does feel out of step with what we need and what we should expect from boards now. I think there's definitely potential to change it.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. And I think it's true of the sort of trustee makeup, also the kind of the workforce kind of makeup, and sort of got some questions about that a little bit later. But we often reflect. We were talking to David Hunt about this, and about about how so much of his time is spent preparing boards and papers for trustees to read. So we're in this kind of like endless loop, and then that sort of dipping in, dipping out, the continuity. It's sort of really hard. But I do wonder sometimes about, it's not reflective of the community or the societies or the age that that organisation is serving. And so, what was right 10 years ago might not be right now. And I think it is a question that people should be asking themselves.
Yeah,
If there's time.
And I guess that's part of the bigger conversation around like, what does modern inclusive governance look like? And you absolutely can't get away from kind of the legal and the, the financial diligence that is required as someone who reads, sits on a finance and investment committee. And I've learned a lot about the markets and investment that I don't think would be much use to me. But, it's really important kind of work. If we sort of zoom back out into the sector, so I guess a couple of things. One, charity digital skills reports. You've got a really great macro view of like what is going on in kind of the sector in terms of skills, capabilities, capacity, I imagine is a hot topic. And then just the work with your clients. I would really love to kind of hear like, what are the big themes? What are the things that are on people's minds, and what is the report kind of screaming to the sector that it really needs to start thinking about?
So there are three things that I'm going to focus in on, and I do want to say that we've got tons of other data in the report. So this has been a tricky choice. But the three things that I always remember about the report are, firstly, despite all the challenges, there are a lot of challenges reflected in the report around access to funding, needing clarity from leadership, and I'll talk a bit more about leadership in a moment. But certainly, despite all those financial constraints that are really making it challenging for some charities to progress as far with digital as they would like, 63% of charities have made progress with digital this year. And that is really hard won, given all the things we know about cost of living crisis, restructures, governance as well, as we were saying earlier. So that is very much my silver lining. Also, another very positive bright spot, we know that 76% of charities are using AI, up significantly from 61% last year. And that for me is a really exciting story about innovation and progress, and charities who are trying different things at a time when it's actually should be almost impossible to do new things. But in some ways, this is a good time to be really looking at what you can do. It's almost like you've got nothing to lose. Why not try doing things differently? The thing that does keep me awake at night is that progress built on foundations that are strong, that are firm. And we know, particularly in the context of AI, that 36% of charities say that their CEO has poor AI skills, and 44% say the same of their boards, speaking of governance. Yeah. So that, for me, is a leadership crisis. It's a leadership skills crisis. And your point earlier about governance and it being out of sync with that day-to-day momentum around digital and change and innovation in charities. And then we see this further lens on that, which is leadership teams and boards potentially not being in quite the same place as the rest of the charity is in terms of what the future looks like and how they can make informed decisions about strategy. That for me is a real worry, because you've got some really positive things happening around change, but not the foundations on which you could make that change truly sustainable. So that for me feels like a very urgent thing to be looked at across the sector.
Yeah, and I think, and we definitely want to dig into where do you start to build those foundations before we get into that. And I feel particularly lucky with my trustee experience at Blood Cancer UK. So I spend a lot of time with the digital team, the fundraising team, and they are experimenting with AI. We did Manifesto, ran a sort of learning session a couple of weeks ago around like marketing technology, AI, and everyone was so engaged. And our whole board conversations, what people are bringing is their lived experience. So I can talk at it from my experience of incorporating it into operations that we're doing, but also then the work with clients. Then we've got like research community where AI and the kind of mass data sort of analysis is like really quite interesting. And so I genuinely feel sometimes I'm quite lucky with my sort of Blood Cancer UK connection, because it is part of the conversation. Absolutely, it's been driven by the leadership team and the sort of the CEO and the board are super engaged. But I guess when you've been going into trustee boards, right, and you've been having those kind of conversations, like how are they landing, and are you being invited in? Are you like trying to get in there to be like, you need to know about this?
Well, I'm not smashing through the window. If anyone boardroom like
break
James
for AI
Bond.
emergency.
Ta-da, I'm here. Well, I think you have to find a way in that doesn't feel too scary for people.
Yeah.
You make it accessible. So what I always do is try and frame it as a business problem
Yeah.
rather than a tech problem, because as we all know, there's lots of leaders out there who are really nervous about technology, right? Because I think the way technology gets talked about
Yeah.
in the wider press and online is that, oh, you need to be a tech expert and you need to be founding a startup, and you don't actually need to do any of those things in order to be good at technology. You just need to be curious and you need to be ambitious and willing to learn. So that is always my way in. It's really about, well, let's not talk about technology per se, but let's look at how things are changing in the market you operate in. So if you're a mental health charity, let's look at what other mental health charities are doing about AI and digital, and let's see how the world around you is changing and shifting, and what could you do about this. So really it's about helping them take some ownership of the change, showing them that the change doesn't need to be scary. It's not about you need to be technical experts, you need to be able to code. It's about helping them to really understand you can't really go on as you are, otherwise that's really a recipe for going backwards. And let's look at some different routes that you could take and what might feel like it's the best fit with your mission. What capabilities would you need in order to make those changes? So you can have that conversation step by step and relate it back to previous changes that the organization has made. That said, I do think the level of change we're seeing with AI is, it's like change on steroids. And this time in a year, goodness only knows where it's all going to be.
Exactly. And I think we're definitely in the space of like being really clear on the use cases, and that can be internal operations, but it also could be, you know, actually your service users are already engaging with AI when they're searching for health information, when they're trying to find access. So it's not to be ignored. And one of the things that we're sort of, I guess, maybe we're fighting the tide is this desire to have this fixed roadmap. Okay, so in 12 months time, 18 months time, 3 years, and it's like, right now there's a horizon. There is no point in trying to plot these fixed things that are going to happen, because the whole point is the uncertainty, the ambiguity, but just knowing like you have to build that agility within the organization to actually embrace the changes and think about creatively ways that maybe AI could support them. So I do think there's something with, you know, for us to reflect on as a sector around our sort of need for certainty, and to have buttoned down this like 1, 2, 3, 5-year roadmap for AI that really is redundant in 3-6 months time, maybe 48 hours, depends what, you know, is happening.
I think that's exactly right. And I don't think that's getting talked about nearly enough. And I'm so pleased you've raised it, because I think agility is a muscle, right? Being able to innovate is a muscle as well. It's a skill set in itself. And charities need that time and that space in order to look at what is evolving around them, what new technologies are coming to market, how they might respond. You know, obviously the big one this year has been about agentic AI. That said, I do think the speed at which we adopt this stuff in the sector, we do need to do it in a really considered way. We need to make sure we're doing the right user research, that we're co-designing with marginalised communities. Otherwise, everyone's just going to go hell for leather on solutionising. And that for me is not ethical or responsible AI adoption. It's about just taking a product to market, and the communities in which we operate are very complex, very sensitive. And that's why we need to take it step by step and work hand in hand with them every step of the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got so many questions for the deep dive. For the deep dive. I mean, I think just to you sort of touched on a lot of the angles that I want to sort of explore, but like for me, you know, where you say like this is like change on steroids, like absolutely. And then sort of my greater reflection around leadership roles is that so many of them are just too big, you know, like because as the world changes, so does the role kind of expand exponentially, and the cognitive load that leaders have to carry is enormous. And what strikes me is that AI requires leaders, boards, particularly very senior leaders, to go to quite a vulnerable place and say, actually, I don't know how any of this works. And when I think about, I don't think that there are sort of comparable times in living memory where the learning curve has been so steep. So how do organizations create a culture of kind of curiosity or vulnerability around learning, particularly when I think about the challenges of the multi-generational workforce? In 10 years we'll have people in the workforce who are probably kind of AI natives, versus people who, may have started their career having never touched a screen or a keyboard. Any thoughts on sort of how organizations sort of look at this in terms of their wider strategy?
So the number one thing that I've seen make the biggest difference, and in fact, I was with an organisation who were doing this brilliantly yesterday, was if you can encourage your leaders to just give stuff a go, to just lean into their natural curiosity. So for an organisation that's just starting out, it might be, well, kick some ideas around about your new strategy with AI. Use it as a thinking partner. Exactly as you were saying earlier, the average charity leader is so overloaded. My friends in the private sector are always just astounded that they're on teams of people to delegate to. Or what do you mean that CEO doesn't have an entire strategy team under them? Well, the average charity doesn't. So encouraging leaders to just explore how they can think with these tools, talk to these tools, work through challenges and opportunities with them, I think that can be really helpful. And then to talk about what they're doing as well. So again, this amazing CEO I was with yesterday from quite a small NGO, he was talking about how he was trying new things with AI and what he'd learned, what he'd not learned. And that was really giving his team permission to then say, actually, we're going to try these things. And then you want to get all of that learning out in the open. You need a really safe culture. You need a culture that doesn't attribute blame. Because actually, in a weird kind of way, that is the safest way to do it. You don't want people experimenting with AI in dark corners, even if they're trying to do the right thing, because that's where the risks can occur. So having these spaces in the organisation where people can learn together, it might be in the weekly meeting, it might be that you've got an AI working group where people can bring their use cases, they can share their learnings, so they're not endlessly reinventing the wheel. And that for me is where the growth and the scaling and the change starts to happen.
Yeah, definitely. So in terms of sort of the opportunity for the sectors, do you see that there are areas where it's like this is like a no regret space for people to kind of experiment? Like, where is the biggest opportunity for the sector, do you think, in terms of adoption?
Well, in terms of our work on the Charity AI Task Force, I think one of the biggest opportunities is around partnerships with other sectors. Now, we all know that the place where money and power is going to congregate, and already is really, is in proprietary tech. I don't think we're ever going to be a sector that has lots of its own proprietary tech. We will have a bit more of it. I'd be surprised if we didn't. I also think that it's very hard to do, right? You need very skilled people, you need amazing developers, you need money and time, and your organisation needs to be set up in a certain way to do it. So I think what we need to do is to look at those unique strengths of the sector, our sector, that other sectors can't really replicate. So to come back to my example of the mental health charity, we have so many niches of expertise within sectors within the sector, for example. So it could be there are so many organisations that know a lot about youth mental health or mental health for people from particular demographics or backgrounds, and that should be music to the ears of digital health companies who might be developing tools and products and services in AI to support people. And I think there's potential for massive growth here to be driven from that, because if you create a really good product, then as you all both know, it essentially has greater impact, it reaches more people, it de-risks things for investors because it's built on really solid understanding of user needs. If we're going to tap into that, we need some sort of innovation proposition as a sector. That's going to be vital. We need a pipeline. So we need to be putting ourselves out there for these partnerships. And we also might need to look at generating value from those partnerships in slightly different ways. So whether that is revenue share or trading arms, which a
Yeah.
lot of charities do have now, the bigger ones, but it's going to require some different skills, some really solid commercial negotiation
Yeah.
skills in order to make the most of those opportunities. And charities asking for what they're worth as well, because the expertise the sector has is incredible.
Yeah.
That's why I love working in this sector.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I guess being open to different models of collaboration. So as opposed to it being kind of an individual or I'm on my silo journey and here we go, kind of opportunities for coming together. Is that something the task force is kind of thinking about around, like, where are the clusters where we can kind of greater than the sum of its parts? And then just when you were talking there about kind of corporate partnerships, it's also making me think about the huge amount of work and investment in kind of NHS and health, and kind of how is that kind of circle being closed with an amazing array of healthcare charities that exist.
So what we've been doing over the last year is we've been trying to get the lie of the land. We've been looking at the landscape, and we've been talking to so many amazing charities behind the scenes, trying to understand what's going on in these different pockets of the sector. So whether it's health, whether it's particular types of charity, and there are so many amazing examples of innovation out there. So absolutely, we're looking at how we can bring together different groups to collaborate in and outside of the sector. I think there's stuff we'll be able to engender through the task force, outside of the task force, and we're really excited about the opportunity to do that. So watch this space.
Thank you. I mean, one of the things that I'm totally cool with saying is that, even as a leader of a technology digital business, like, AI is moving at a pace that I feel like it's impossible to keep up with. And one of my experiences or sort of observations is, obviously it's a controversial subject. There's a lot to be concerned about. There's a lot of risk through so many different lenses, bias, sustainability, impact, the future workforce, people's cognitive abilities, like the list goes on. And it seems to me that depending on what your sort of fear or hope is, you can find a set of very credible voices who will back up your fear. So it's quite a polarized view. And, it does sort of feel impossible actually to sort of know where are the nuggets of truth and integrity in this landscape. And I wondered, like, where do you go for your information? How do you keep your sort of, because I know that you'll have some guardrails around this could be an amazing force for good, but it could also be devastating in the wrong instances. So yeah, what your thoughts are, and where do you go to keep up to date, or as up to date as you can be?
I think that mindset is really important. So before I talk about where I go to keep up to date with things, I think you need to sit with both of those fears and hopes in order to adopt AI responsibly. So I have never seen people react to a technology in such an emotive way. I've never seen anything like this in my entire career. And I don't think it helps that the way the wider media talks about AI is very hyperbolic. Everyone is going to lose their jobs all at once and terrible things are going to happen. Equally, I don't think it's something which is a magic bullet and is going to mean that everyone can retire on universal basic income. I just don't see that just happening in the current political landscape. So I think you need to sit with both of those things. I always say when I start those conversations with boards and other leadership teams, if you're feeling simultaneously excited and terrified about AI, that's actually a really good place, even though it may not feel like it, because it means you're evaluating critically what is the right thing to do, and you're aware of the risks and also the opportunities as well. So it does mean holding a lot of uncertainty and being comfortable with that. And in fact, I was talking about this with a client the other day. One of the big challenges for leaders around that is that historically, leaders have been encouraged to take away that uncertainty, to almost act in that parental way in organisations. And actually right now that's not something they can
Yeah.
do. They have to be open about the challenges they're facing, but also be very honest about there's an opportunity for us all to learn
Mm,
together and to skill up
mm,
and to transform for the future. So again, it's sitting with that
mm,
excitement and that fear. In terms of where I learn, I just go and talk to as many people as possible. So yesterday I was speaking, I was running a workshop for a client that's an NGO, supporting them in navigating some of the stuff around AI. Then in the afternoon I was presenting at a tech company summit where there were lots of charities there, and just all the conversations you have, whether it's the Q&A in the room or the chats you have with people over coffee, everything teaches me something, as well as the data we get from the reports and lots of other research out there in the sector that we read. And some of the amazing people that we talk to regularly, like Tim Cook, for example, from AI Confident, and other amazing experts that are out there. So I think you just have to really lean into the learning and get out there and talk to people and learn as much as you can from as many conversations as possible.
Yeah. And that's sort of, I guess, Rebecca, your point around the role of a leader is so expansive and it's quite blurring in terms of like the role that you're fulfilling, the outcomes you're actually trying to achieve, and then investing in yourself, your learning, your curiosity, and knowing that that is contributing to how you show up as a leader. It's a lot. We spoke about the 50 million hats that are sort of floating around that you're sort of seamlessly putting on day in and day out. But there's also a reality of like putting, I guess, the sort of the boundaries in place for how you protect yourself. You know, how do you make sure that you're able to show up yesterday and kind of bring the energy and the enthusiasm? Like what are you doing in terms of like making sure you're okay and that your boundaries are kind of in place?
So I'm going to give a different answer to how my family would probably answer this question. My husband, who is so understanding and supportive, he would always say things like, "Oh, you're working so hard," and it's because I love what I do. You know, I love going along to all of these amazing conversations, like the one we're having now,
Yeah.
or the work that I do. I have the privilege of doing with charities, and I just get so much, so much in my cup from that. That's how I fulfill myself, and that's what I really enjoy, and that's the energy I draw from. I definitely am someone who loves my job a little too much, and if I didn't have the family, my kids and my husband, I probably would just do my job 24/7, which I don't think is a healthy way to be. The only thing I've learned that helps me keep a semblance of balance, and it is very much a semblance of balance rather than, I think, a well-honed balance, is I do a lot of exercise. So I run and I do weights and things like that. I love music. I love going to gigs. I read a lot as well. So I try and have these little slivers of things in my life that are for non-work Zoe, because otherwise I think she would disappear, and that's not a good place to be. You really need to hang on to that core of yourself, because then you bring a lot more to your work, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But it's so easy to lose sight and to understand it's a complex relationship we have with work, what it's doing to our brain chemistry, the stories that we've told about ourselves, but also the enjoyment. Like sometimes it almost seems like we can't talk about the fact that actually that there's a satisfaction from working in the way the way that we do, that gives us something that other people perhaps can't see.
And I guess what I really liked, well, what kind of resonated is also you know yourself, like because actually a lot of kind of knowing how to kind of manage things like boundaries is understanding yourself, and that isn't an easy journey. And we've had lots of conversations
Yeah.
about how my identity is so baked into what I do, how I do it, the energy and the collaboration, but also to be in service of clients. And I guess that's something I wondered about yourself, is that sort of the reward that you get from kind of working with kind of your clients, like where is that sort of energy coming from? Is it about being in service? Is it about collaboration? A bit of everything?
Do you know what I love? I love being in the trenches with a
Hmm.
client. I think you definitely still need boundaries. But I said to a client recently, the end of quite a project where they had been going through an awful lot of change internally. I said, if it's not messy, we don't learn anything.
Yeah.
And actually, I really like it when
Mm.
you're working step by step with someone and you're really
Mm.
supporting them through change. Because if it's just straightforward and it's all plain sailing, firstly, I'd wonder if they were really listening,
Yeah.
because I think you need a bit of critical distance. You need a little bit of
Yeah.
tension. Otherwise, it's not really growth and
Mm.
progress, is it? So I think that is really important. And weirdly, I'm someone I quite like a crisis situation, which sounds a bit odd, but I find it really rewarding when you go in and you support a
Yeah.
charity through a time of tumultuous change.
Mm.
There's often a trigger event, which means we have been brought in. So it could be something like a change of leadership or
Yeah.
strategy, or something really difficult has happened
Mm.
internally. And in some ways, those are ideal conditions for change to happen, right? Because as we were saying earlier,
Yeah.
you have to do things differently. You can't stand still. And it's a privilege to see how people evolve and learn when you work alongside them. It's wonderful. That's the thing that gets me out of bed in the morning.
Yeah. And are there any kind of teams or organizations? You obviously mentioned one on the call where you've
Mm.
been like, do you know what, this energy, this culture, like what they're up for, like this is fertile ground for like
Mm.
actual change and impact to happen?
Absolutely. So an organisation I'll give a shout out to that we worked with this year, who have exactly got that kind of energy, Royal Marsden Cancer Charity.
Mm.
So we worked with them on their digital strategy earlier this year, and I said to them, if I could bottle the energy your digital team have, in fact, they should just bottle it and sell it as a fundraising campaign. Everyone would buy it. Really young, really diverse team,
Mm.
fantastic leadership from Deepika and Nicola and other amazing leaders on the team like Hazel, just absolutely phenomenal, really, really great different perspectives, very safe culture. Everyone's challenging each other in a really positive,
Mm.
constructive way, but learning together and being so
Mm.
creative. And I'd love to see more of that energy in other organisations as well. I know it's so hard at the moment for a lot of charities, but gosh, what an energy they have. It's fantastic.
Yeah. There are sort of two things that I would like to circle back round on, if that's okay. One is skills for the future, and one is to come back to sort of the little conversation we had about self-doubt. But something you've picked up on there with that team, like young, diverse, in your like thinking about our conversation in AI and how that might rewire the workforce, what skills, qualities do you think that the sector should be looking to kind of consider in their sort of hiring plan of the future?
Yeah, and I love the way you frame that, the rewiring the workforce, because that's exactly what it needs to be, isn't it?
Mhm.
Well, one thing that's very much on my mind at the moment is the government's new AI skills framework. And for me, that is so interesting because if you look at it, only a third of it is actually technical
Mm.
skills. The rest of it is really about responsible adoption and also the soft skills as well. So actually, I think some of the things we need, obviously, there's all the technical skills around product and AI tooling itself and data. And we know those are things which the sector
Mm.
can find quite challenging. We see that from the data in the report itself. But I think there's also something we need to really lean into around agility and problem solving. And some very live examples of that without naming any particular organisations. What we're seeing in some charities at the moment is that people are getting really good and really confident at using AI, but the workflow around the use of AI,
Mm.
so that might be the problem definition at the start, understanding user needs, getting really good
Mm.
evidence of that, then the quality assurance at the end, and then the ongoing
Mm.
robustness of the testing, learning, improving process isn't quite there yet. So we really need to start looking at AI in this very holistic end-to-end
Mm.
Yeah.
way. And I wonder whether we'll start to see a resurgence of a discipline, which for me has never gone away, but needs to be championed even more now, which is service design
Mm.
Yeah.
and really understanding what our audience needs, beginning
Yeah.
with that and
Yeah.
working through all of those steps really clearly. And that for me, in some ways, is even more exciting than cool products which we develop really quickly.
Yeah.
And it's interesting you say that about service design, which is something that we've applied to many transformation projects. It's not about like even the marketing that you're putting out to the public is a service. So let's use service blueprint and let's really understand kind of the end-to-end, like holistic, like what's really happening, where are the pain points, and then, like you say, identifying opportunities for kind of overcoming that with use cases, but then, like you say, really understanding like what are the implications, like, and I guess something we're sort of really cognizant of at Manifesto is kind of it's people plus AI. We're not talking about removing the quality thinking that can only happen kind of in a human, but also the unintended consequences, and leaving space for, I guess, those two realities, and kind of that being part of the process, that something will happen that you could not plan for because you don't know and haven't tried it yet, but something will. And then how do you close that loop? And I think service design as a sort of practice and thinking is a really great way to kind of hold that space for people.
Yes, I think it really is. And it's a discipline that we need to see more of across the sector. And coming back to leadership skills, it's something that I would love more leaders to understand. And also for things like user needs to be much more of a regular feature in decision making in boardrooms. I mean, how many boardrooms have we all been in where the needs of users don't get talked about nearly as much as they should do?
I mean, I think it still happens in even just sort of the basics of website design. There are still people that want it to reflect their kind of organization hierarchy or the department's needs, and not the end user. So yeah, I totally agree. I was listening to something with Brené Brown the other day, talking about a new book, like the importance of systems thinking as well. She's like, that's the one thing I would get people to learn. And I think often organizations see service design, these sort of extra kind of like sort of cognitive, intellectual kind of like business like frameworks as like as a luxury, or like it's an add-on to that process, but actually it's the core of making that outcome sing as sweetly as it can. So I totally agree. I wanted to say thank you for being just so open about, look, I sit here and I have moments of self-doubt too, because I think one of the agendas that Lou and I would like to kind of get out there is that, lots of us feel like that. And it might, of course, social media, we all know that lives are not as they're portrayed. But I think the people that we work with, even day to day, or come into, I think we often can imagine that they've got everything sorted and we haven't. And when we talked in our sort of briefing, we sort of touched on a topic where your kind of sort of early formative experiences can shape a set of beliefs or values. So we all have that voice. Well, most of us have a voice that says, we're not good enough, or this, that, and the other. And we talked a little bit about that. That certainly sort of shaped how I kind of some of the stuff that I've battled with. And, after we talked, I sort of remembered a whole thing that I used to have about speaking. So growing up as a child, I was always told that spoke, I was common in the way that I, like the way that I spoke. It's all going to come out now. The way that I spoke was the kind of common, which was how it was described at the time for not saying your T's properly. And I think that really made me very nervous about using my voice, about public speaking, about feeling like what I was going to say had value. And it wasn't until I made that connection in therapy that I kind of go, okay, that's not my voice. That's not really what I believe, but that's a conditioned belief that's informed that voice. And it feels to me like a lot of the work has to come from inside, not sort of extrinsic validation. But I wondered, in your sort of journey, like what your relationship with it, and how have you sort of managed yourself within that kind of context of self-doubt?
Well, firstly, I'm so sorry you had that experience,
Yeah.
because, and I think this is something that does happen to girls and
Yeah.
women as well when we get
Yeah.
into the workplace. It's never just, oh, you did that very finite thing in a way that we need to develop together. It's about judgment, and it's about shame, isn't it? And shame feels like a very individual thing that we are forced to carry ourselves. And I think that's just just wrong. So I totally relate to what you were saying. When we had the call, we talked about I had quite a challenging childhood. Probably the most significant thing that happened was my dad died when I was very, very young from cancer. And that was really difficult. And I've always carried that with me. I have found that therapy has been enormously helpful, very open with my team, and that I go to therapy still every few weeks, and I find it really useful. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because however you choose to get support, whether it's therapy or whether it's coaching or whether it's having a great network of friends and family, the fact is that you've got to do that work on yourself as
Yeah.
well, haven't you? And you've got to take ownership of that. And quite often it might start with one particular thing, like a phobia or an anxiety. But actually, if you do it right, you end up fixing other things as
Yeah.
well. So I feel now that I can walk into meetings or difficult board presentations. We were talking about boards earlier, and I feel generally very calm because I'm in a place now in my life where I've done lots of work on myself and I'm quite happy with who I am to some extent. But I'm also very real about the fact that I do sit with a lot of self-doubt. But I always look at it as a kind of yes, and yes, you can have self-doubt, but you can also be ambitious and kind and push yourself to do
Yeah.
things, because why not?
Yeah. I think one of the things that I've sort of really learned is almost sort of to use it as something to almost like sort of acknowledge, sort of make friends with it and say, well, what if I just put that to one side? Like it's still there, like that's fine, but it doesn't have to be front and center all the time. And I mean, my sort of experience of therapy is that I had to really learn some nervous system regulation in myself, really know when I was activated or how I was feeling. And then like therapy became like, actually, that's when the understanding and all these aha moments kind of dropped in, because I was in a place where I could actually hear them and sit with them and reflect. So yeah, thank you.
And I would say it also helps to know that you need to surround yourself with people who are giving you the right kind of energy. And I'm not saying that you're not asking for feedback and you're not
Yeah.
looking for just confirmation bias, but a big part of my confidence comes from being around people like Rebecca and yourself and other people who I'm lucky enough to call kind of friends or people I know, who help you see the things you can't see in yourself and remind you of the purpose. And you have every right to kind of stand in this room, and you do have lived experience that can hold value. And I think it is that sort of value attribution and knowing that you have a right to kind of be in those spaces. So we have covered quite a gamut of topics, and we could carry on for I think another few days, but we've got stuff to do. We've got the world to change. So I'm gonna wrap us up. Piece of advice. Now, this advice could be for a leader now, or the next generation of what we hope leaders are going to be coming through in the sector. What's that piece of advice that you would share?
So the piece of advice I'd share, particularly to people who might feel they don't belong in the room, or they might think I'm from, like me, from a marginalised community, should I even walk into this room, is you belong in the room. Okay, you belong in the room. You have got a different perspective to share. It's valuable. That's a strength. So just go into the room. And the other thing that I've really started to do over the last few years is, even if I feel nervous about something, so that could be AI for some leaders, it could be making difficult decisions about technology, is just to go out there to learn and just give it a go, see what happens, surround yourself with people you can learn from. Even if you feel that self-doubt, just giving things a go and see what happens.
I've got one last question that I have to ask just because of your background. So what's your favourite book? Is there a book that you feel has changed you, that you had a different perspective after you read it? given
that's
your sort of interest and your background in
yeah, yeah.
English.
So I'd say the book that really changed my life in terms of AI would definitely be Yuval Noah Harari's Homo Deus,
Yeah,
because I think that's been so prescient in terms of how AI is going to change society, how it's going to change politics, and I would advise any leader to read that.
thank you.
Added to the
The
list.
list.
And there should be, so I've seen a few things sort of circulating in the sector around like playlists. I think we need a book list. We need like the books that have changed and influenced you, and maybe that is next on our to-do list for
Yeah,
things that we
yeah.
should encourage for people in the sector.
Great idea, love that.
For sure.
Amazing. That's a wrap.
That's a wrap.